Good, thanks. In response to your first point, I think Leibniz could say, look, my goal here is simply to defend the Augustinian principle, understood as a principle about wretchedness. So the innocent are never wretched, but that doesn't mean to say they don't feel pain. So perhaps he could take this overall strategy. Look, I'm prepared to admit that pain is justified for the sake of the greater good, but I'm not prepared to say that wretchedness is ever justified for the sake of greater good. And that would perhaps take care of the problem. With regard to the latter point, I think all I would say is that what various horrors, it's part of the package deal. And because of the theory of complete concepts, compossibility, etc., that Leibniz's God cannot eliminate these horrifying aspects from the possible world. Isn't it sufficient for him to invoke that aspect of his theodicy to get him off the hook there? That if you want all the good things in this world, if you want Mother Teresa, you've got to put up with that of Hitler. And if you want Christ, I think there's one passage where Leibniz says, Malebranche spirit, that this world is actualized because it alone contains Christ, but that, I take it, is not a dominant theme in Leibniz's thought. But certainly the idea that every possible world is a package deal which cannot be edited is central to his thought, and I would, at this point, I can't add to that. Otherwise, I would invoke the distinction between pain and wretchedness and say that pain may be justified for the sake of a greater good, in the case of animals and small children, but that doesn't apply to wretchedness. There's an absolute ban on innocent people feeling wretched.
Okay, the next question.
Yes, my question has to do with the wonderfully provocative conclusion that Leibniz is scarcely a Christian thinker at all.
Yeah.
And it seems to me you've got two arguments going here. One is that his account of the relationship between faith and reason, or reason and revelation, is not a proper one, that revelation gets overwhelmed by reason. And then the earlier, more interesting argument is the one that he takes what you call a standard view, that in the suffering of Christ, he suffered only in his human nature, he did not suffer in his divine nature.
Yes.
Now, it seems to me on the first of those 2 points, there's enormous diversity, at least in the patristic period, as to the relationship between faith and reason. And it seems to me that even though Origen may have gotten into trouble down the road, it seems to me there are possibilities there that Leibniz would fit with the earlier tradition. Or to put it more sharply, it seems to me there's no canonical tradition in the way that there is with Nicaea and Chalcedon on the relationship between faith and reason. That's left wide open. It's not canonical. And there's enough room there for Leibniz at this point. And then on the first point, the Christological point, the more recent work, I think, for example, by Paul Gavriluc on the suffering of the impassible God, argues that, in fact, that the canonical tradition that emerges insists that Christ did suffer in his divine nature, and that the standard view that you've identified here is in fact not accurate. Now, this is very controversial, but in fact that the drive from the Neoplatonist side and from the sort of Arian side was to avoid any idea that God suffered in Christ, that Christ suffered in his divine nature. So it seems to me that if we make both moves on this front, that we open up what's possible in the patristic period, and we at least allow for cogent arguments that in fact the standard view that you have referred to here is false, we may be able to rehabilitate Leibniz as a pretty good theologian.
Okay, I'm fascinated by the issue of whether Christ suffers just qua human being or qua God, qua second person of the Trinity. I nearly added a sentence or so saying that this, I'm in danger of stumbling into heresy, or without doing a complete research of what the fathers and other theologians have said about this, maybe I'm advancing a heretical claim. But I think you said it was the standard view that Christ suffers on the cross simply qua human being and not... No, not the standard view.
The canonical view is the other.
Sorry, yes.
The heretics who argue for the other.
Okay, well, I should have inserted a clause saying that there are heresies in this area, and so thank you. I should have done some more research on that aspect. I thought I could get away, and I consulted one person, but should have consulted more. As regards the issue of Leibniz's Christianity, of course, there are ways of pursuing this topic that are quite unprofitable in regard to sincerity. My own sense is that the doctrines of the fall, the redemption, the incarnation play almost no role in Leibniz's thought and are contrary to the spirit of Leibniz's thought. Perhaps it's, I think Don Rutherford wants to gloss the doctrine of the fall such that it can play a role in Leibniz's metaphysical system, can be integrated with that system. But the contrast between Malebranche and Leibniz in this area seems to me to be very stark. It's not a question of sincerity, which is, that's a sterile topic to pursue, I think, but Malebranche's philosophy and theology are shot through with the central doctrines of Christianity, the fall and the incarnation. They have their home there. They just don't in Leibniz, and one gets the sense that he's playing a dialectical game in his response to Baal. I do, at least, although that's, again, on the verge of raising the issue of sincerity. I think that Leibniz was absolutely serious about his theism of a Neoplatonic variety. Christianity was, to put it crudely, the only game in town, and he knew that he had to make what he said consistent with it. But the central doctrines of Christianity seem to me to have a very poor fit with Leibniz's basically Neoplatonic metaphysics.
Okay, next question.
I'm wondering if you think there's a tension in Leibniz between the way that he's using reflection to handle the case of human suffering and the way he's using it to handle the case of animal and sort of infant suffering. So you talk about reflection enabling one to sort of look past or redirect attention at something else. But then you think, well, it seems like that would be something that would enable one to experience more happiness, but that's something that, in fact, animals lack. So it points in the opposite direction of what I thought was initially suggested, because you talk about, two particular things the animals lack in lacking reflection. There's no sense of pain beyond the moment, right? And so here you're thinking of cases like chronic pain. They don't realize they're going to be in pain for a really long time here, but also lack of certain interpretive concepts like, oh, I could have this disease that, that could potentially kill me. But it seems like both of those things could go in the opposite direction as well, right? So they don't have certain concepts like, right, I've just got the stomach flu, this is going to be over in a little bit. So it seems like, having reflection actually helps in those cases, and animals and infants not having reflection doesn't help Leibniz's case there.
Well, I certainly agree that reflection can make matters better, can be a source of consolation for ourselves, cheering ourselves up when I reflect, oh, it's only the stomach flu and not stomach cancer, let's say. I certainly agree with that. I perhaps gave a rather one-sided account of the role that reflection might play in relation to medical symptoms. But my sense is that in the case of animals, there's just pain that is, in some sense, not for a subject. And that the lack of reflection really does mean that this pain has no significance for them whatever. The sense is not really